All right, well, welcome everybody once again to another installment of, I believe it's Fresh Faces Frightening Film Facts with Kit Kat, Kristen, and Jazzy Jane. You got to help me on this one.
Okay, I was going to say the Fresh Faces Frightening Fun Facts. It's a bit of a tongue twister.
Oh, that music sounds oddly familiar.
Yes, it does. It's that time of season. When people celebrate this holiday, their activities normally consist of inventive trick-or-treaters, carving pumpkins, eating assorted candies, watching scary movies. I mean, this list can go on and on. Frantic evening, peeps. My name is Dr. Samantha Loomis, and this is the night I came to elaborate Halloween. Most of you may know my legendary ex-husband, Dr. Samuel Loomis, throughout the decades and his neurotic incidents on Halloween. There is an evil psychopath lurking on October 31st. I have been rehearsing this podcast to death the past few days, but like Dr. Loomis once said to the Doyle's neighbor on that terrifying night back in 1978, you don't know what death is. An alternative exclamation was, is this a Halloween prank? Just a teeny? No, you weenie! The villainous, unstoppable Michael Myers is not human. Unfortunately, my marriage to Dr. Loomis terminated because he was overly preoccupied with this black-eyed, unspeakable monster. God rest his soul, and I'm here to give you all a better grasp on the stories of Michael Myers. Additionally, critique and count down the Halloween franchises because, as promised, there will be some amusement to this podcast.
Oh, not even going to try to top that one. That was just top tier.
So let's let the countdown begin.
Absolutely. And you know what? I never realized how bad I wanted to see a spinoff about Dr. Loomis's divorce proceedings until now. That would just be a fantastic little entry. Halloween, 6.5.
Yeah, it was quite an emotional time, but I understand. I mean, this patient of him kept him quite busy up until the time of his death, and he's still on the loose.
And of course, as we stated earlier, we are looking at the entire Halloween oeuvre. And of course, it's probably not a bad idea to start talking about the two films that aren't coming out this year. So we got Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. Kind of a bummer we're not getting our annual dose of Michael Myers this year. But we still have 11 Halloween movies that are already out there to trudge through. So in a typical uncommon journalism fashion, we're going from what we ranked as perhaps, we hate using the term worst, but perhaps least not good Halloween movie, going up all the way to number one. Not really a surprise what number one's going to be, but it's still kind of fun to kind of trudge over the entire series and to see how the Michael Myers mythos has evolved. So starting off at number 11, what we both agree is the least good Michael Myers outing. From 2002, it is the universally reviled Halloween Resurrection. So do you have any just general thoughts on this movie and why it's so hated by the horror community?
Halloween Resurrection. Well, first, I'd like to start off by saying it was directed by Rick Rosenthal, who also directed Halloween 2 back in 1981, and he is married to Nancy Stevens, who played Nurse Marion Chambers in the original 1-2 H2O, and is also set to portray Nurse Chambers in the upcoming Halloween Kills, scheduled to be released on October 2021. Fingers crossed with that. So I recently rewatched Halloween Resurrection, and again, it's entertaining, but it's not great. I know I've stated this in the past, but it's something to watch at your leisure. I found myself just rolling my eyes because Michael Myers is still alive and kicking butt. I mean, kicking kills. Yeah, that's a better way to say it. It turns out that Laurie Strode did not decapitate him back in Halloween H2O. It turns out that it was just a paramedic whom Michael swapped clothes with, also crushed his voice box, so he would not talk to make it seem like he was Michael Myers. So Lori is now traumatized by two events. She's got her vicious brother on the loose, and she killed an innocent person. However, Michael does eventually catch up with her in the mental institution, and they fight a little bit, but then he throws her off the rooftop to her death. But first she kisses him before she's saying, "I'll see you in hell." That I just started laughing because if that were my brother, who was, killed, like my friends, family, just innocent human beings, I would just say, "Go to hell," and then I would fall over to my death. I would not kiss him, for God's sake. That part was interesting.
Yeah, I'm generally against sibling kissing in general, so especially when it's Michael Myers. Just can't be a fan of that one.
Right.
So there's a lot of things to unpack about this movie. It has a bad reputation for a reason. So kind of the general plot line is it's sort of following kind of Michael Myers being thrust in the middle of like a Big Brother or Survivor type reality TV program, which, seems like a pretty cool idea, but the execution leaves a lot to be desired. So what do you think about that particular approach of putting Michael Myers in sort of a quasi-found footage environment?
That's the part that was interesting because it's Drunken College, where they set up web cameras throughout the Myers' house. They're daring each other to spend the night to figure out why he killed his sister on Halloween night of 1963. Now, as crazy as this may sound, but honestly, I don't blame Michael for wanting vengeance. I mean, they invaded his property. Whether I had a violent history, thank God I don't, or even a good history, I would not want someone trespassing. I would just come up and ask me, and I will give you all the details. It's just going on property like that, it is obvious what will happen. And it kind of reminds me of my college years when my friends and I played the Psychic Circle, which is supposedly more detailed than the Ouija board, in one of the dorms, which used to be a mental institution. So I cannot say that we were brave because supposedly an unknown presence spelled out my friend's name. The room got cold, and then we heard banging and clanging in the attic. Not exaggerating, it was pretty creepy. So we put an end to that. But going back to Halloween Resurrection, in the end, Michael survives. The evil is still there.
We got to do a podcast one day about your college experiences summoning the dark forces. I think that's just a great topic in and of itself. But
it's hard to believe that was 20 years ago.
And as we all know, evil spirits were way more evil back then. So much more dangerous. I think the only positive thing I have to say about Resurrection is I'm a huge rap fan, and I'm a huge Busta Rhymes fan in general. And I thought he brought a lot of hamminess to the performance. It was pretty campy. But, I thought he was the best thing about the movie. He brought some energy to it. Having, a guy come in there and actually be sort of a serviceable foe to Michael Myers, actually stand up to him, even if it does involve a really, really corny kung fu scene at the end. It's kind of a guilty pleasure. I will watch the movie just for Busta Rhymes, but everything else I'll just kind of tune out.
Right, and what you said, I agree. He did bring out the pleasure in the movie with some of his quirky acts.
And the only real issue I have there is, how back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, every horror movie had that corresponding rap song?
Yes.
Like Deep Blue Sea had the Deep Blue Sea by LL Cool J. For some reason, we didn't get a corresponding Busta Rhymes Halloween Michael Myers themed tie-in rap song with this movie, which I think is just absolutely unconscionable.
I agree on that too. And again, I think that goes back to why we have Halloween Resurrection at the bottom of our list. So again, whoever's listening to this podcast, again, just watch it when you want to.
Yeah, I think it's hardly a controversial opinion to say it's one of the lesser Michael Myers movies. Also, a very popular convention we have here. Number 2 in our countdown, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 from 2009. Now, I will say this is the only Halloween movie in the entire franchise that I outright absolutely hate. That I do not want to watch this again for any reason whatsoever. I mean, I can understand some of the artistic merits to it, but overall, I just feel like this isn't actually technically a Halloween movie. That's just sort of my general vibe.
In some ways, yes. And again, this is at the lower part of the list because the plot is completely different in this movie. I guess I'm used to the original storyline, but instead they had Angel Myers and not Cynthia Myers for Laurie Strode's real name. One of the reasons why I didn't care for this movie because I hated seeing Annie Brackett die. I mean, because that they kind of altered the plot, I thought that she would live because I guess 1 year later, traumatized and living with the Bracketts, and Laurie Strode is also seeing ghosts while she's in the mental institution. So it kind of goes from horror to thriller. But either way, Laurie Strode is more vocal in this film. I mean, she fights with Annie, has these dangerous dreams. I mean, lots of obscene language and screaming in hysterics. And I mean, kudos to Scout Taylor Compton because she must have been exhausted when filming and rehearsing this film. But either way, yes, unfortunately, I don't care too much for the plot.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you go to a Halloween movie, you sort of expect a certain ambiance, a certain atmosphere. Even in Resurrection, the really, really bad Halloween movies, you still kind of have that Halloween vibe to it. And I thought this movie just completely lacked that altogether. There are too many supernatural elements. To me, it felt a little bit too esoteric. It just, it just didn't feel like a Michael Myers movie to me. Even less of a Halloween movie really than Halloween 3 in some respects.
Okay, so we are now going into Halloween 3?
Not quite yet. That's coming up. That's a couple of inches ahead. But just kind of put it in a frame of reference, where how I feel about this movie just compared to the rest of the Halloween movies. But yeah, I just really, really don't like this movie. I can't say there's one specific thing I don't like about it. It's just completely taken as a holistic product. It just doesn't do anything for me.
It's just over the edge. Yes, you could tell that I've been looking forward to this podcast and the season because I'm like, yay, Halloween 3, we're going to talk about it already? No, not quite. But yes, Halloween 2, which came out in 2009, directed by Rob Zombie. Again, something to watch when you absolutely have nothing to do.
Yeah, and just a note to our listeners right now, our viewers, get the Excedrin out now because the timeline for the Halloween movies is going to get really, really confusing here in a minute. Talking about the overlapping, chronologies, the reboots, the remakes, the sequels, the timeline. So just be prepared for that. It's going to get a little confounding. All right, and moving along from one Rob Zombie movie to the first Rob Zombie Halloween movie from 2007, it is the appropriately titled Halloween. Now this one, to me, it's kind of two movies. The first part I really, really legitimately, unironically enjoyed. But when it became like a straight remake of the 1978 original, that's when I'm like, not really for me.
Right. And then on my end, where I think that I mostly paid attention more to the fun facts and also the actors in this movie. Because, for a remake, they did have a memorable cast. You had Brad Dourif, whom we know as Charles Lee Ray, or the voice of Chucky in the Chucky movies. Malcolm McDowell, who was Sheriff Lee Brackett. Danielle Harris, who was Jamie Lloyd in Halloween 4 and 5 as Annie Brackett. There was also Danny Trejo, Leslie Easterbrook, who used to be in Laverne and Shirley, Dee Wallace, and many others. And as far as the fun facts, Emma Stone auditioned for the role of Laurie Strode. Yes, because I've mainly seen her in like Easy A, The Help. And she was also in that one musical. Sorry, can't think of it off the top of my head, but it was fairly recent. But I have yet to see her in a horror movie, so I'm curious as to why that didn't work out. And La La Land. That's the name of the movie. It was at the tip of my tongue. I'm like, what is this movie called? But yes, and Rob Zombie originally wanted Danielle Harris to play Laurie Strode before Scout Taylor Compton came into the picture. So, rather than, again, paying attention to the plot and I would say grasping the remake, I would say I think I mainly focused more on the details and the facts that kind of, I would say, not made me enjoy the movie, but it's much better than the last two that we elaborated.
Yeah, without question. The idea of trying to actually humanize Michael Myers in the first part of the movie I thought was very, very interesting. You know, kind of looking at it, his childhood trauma, actually kind of giving him a quasi-relatable and understandable origin for why he's such a violent maniac. I thought that was pretty interesting. But once the click turned, I think it started with the Danny Trejo murder. After that, that's when the movie started falling off the wheels for me. But there's a lot of good things into it. I mean, it's a typical Rob Zombie movie. Everybody is just various shades of just horrific trash, and everything looks dirty and grimy, and there's a lot of profanity. And if that's your bag, that's your bag. But to me, like I said, it didn't quite feel like a traditional Halloween movie. You know, it had some elements to it, but on the whole, it felt more like a Rob Zombie movie with the Michael Myers dressing on top of it than an actual Michael Myers movie.
Right. Yes, and again, they differentiated the plot a little bit. Oh, but overall, I mean, it's not a bad movie, but, you know, for a remake, again, there's always those pros and cons to it, as we both know.
Yeah, and I will say, in the pantheon of horror remakes, it's probably one of the better ones. I think it's better than the Friday the 13th remake, certainly better than the Elm Street remake, so
I agree.
Not a great movie, not really a bad movie, just kind of waffling in the middle. Can we agree on that one?
I agree.
All right, and moving along, we're going back to the mainline Halloween series here with number 5, fitting enough, Halloween 5 from 1989.
Yes, and this is the revenge of Michael Myers, right?
Okay, yeah, wait, the return, the revenge, the curse. So yeah, it's the revenge.
Yes, okay, yes, Halloween 5. And this is now 12 years ago since Dr. Loomis burned in that fire with Michael Myers. And my favorite quote from him was, "I prayed that he would burn in hell, but in my heart, I knew that hell would not have him." And with this one, I could not help feeling dejected because it's the end of the 1980s. They killed off Rachel's character very early. There's this psychic connection between Michael Myers and his niece, Jamie Lloyd. There are these sweet, innocent kittens in the barn, because as you know, Michael Myers goes and slaughters that couple with the kittens in there. And then, of course, frivolous Tina and her psycho boyfriend, who really made me crack up toward the middle of the movie, because, again, not only is his name Michael, but once he knew that his car was wrecked, he goes, "Trick or treat, slaughter." I mean, that was, I'm trying to think of a real good strong word than quirkiness, but that is just a bizarre way to end your life, by just shouting out, "Trick or treat."
Yeah, I think that actually kind of encapsulates the movie in its entire essence there. It's a very awkward and weird kind of movie, but like I said, 1989, that was a really awkward and weird year. You know, you're transitioning out of the 80s going into the 1990s, so it kind of feels like it's a movie without really a chronology. It's kind of stuck in that weird cultural dead zone where it doesn't really feel like the 80s, but not quite the 90s either.
Right.
I'm trying to think if there's anything that really stands out to me. The idea of Michael Myers, his character, his personality traits fluctuates quite a bit in the movie. Like there's one scene where he's running over, elementary schoolers with a car, no problem. But then he's talking with Dr. Loomis, and then he starts thinking about his youth, and he starts breaking down crying. So you're kind of like,
yes,
kind of a bipolar guy, Michael. You got to pick one or the other.
I would say this is a faulty film, but splendid soundtrack. And one of my top 2 favorite songs were Romeo, Romeo by Becca, and then Dancing on Midnight by White Sister. White Sister also did a song for Fright Night back in 1985 called Save Me Tonight, which is one of my favorites. So yes, they had very seductive but also energetic music. And going back to Rachel's character, she was more stylish and confident in this film, but I think that the producers wanted to inform the audience that nobody, not even Rachel, can survive Michael Myers. And I think that that's why that they killed her in the beginning, because they knew that she was unable to defeat him like she did in Halloween 4.
And of course, you talk about Halloween 5, you have to talk about the ending, very enigmatic at the time. So when you first saw the movie, and we see this mysterious character actually break Michael Myers out of prison, what were your initial thoughts on where they were headed with this, just as far as the general Halloween franchise?
Then that's what leads to, and again, when we elaborate this, but then that's what leads to the curse of Michael Myers. Because that's the thorn cult. That's a thorn cult, right?
It is.
Yes. If anything, not only are they controlling and manipulating Michael Myers, but they kind of take sides with him and his evil. But I think that that's what Halloween 5 entails as you move into the franchise and as the plot follows on. Because, as you know, with the Halloween franchises, although they are significant movies, the plots do skip around, which can be kind of confusing.
And when you say confusing in Halloween 6, which is the next film in our entry, The Curse of Michael Myers, I think that certainly is an apt description of this movie. Beginning with the fact there's actually two different versions of it. So we have the original theatrical version, and then we have the producer's cut. So do you have a particular preference over which one you think is the better edit?
I really don't. I would say I'm going to have to go with the producer's cut, because Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, came out in 1995. This is moving to the middle of the list because there's grunge, alternative music, flannel shirts, windbreakers, preppy plaid outfits, a lot of nostalgia from the 1990s. Also, this is Donald Pleasance's last movie of the Halloween franchises, so little emotional with that. I found this movie very unique of the Halloween franchises. And first I want to start off by saying Tommy Doyle, who was portrayed by Paul Rudd, is reintroduced and approaches Dr. Loomis. He also takes care for Jamie's baby, and he also is a basket case himself, considering he witnessed the murders when Laurie babysat for him that treacherous night. You also introduce the dysfunctional family whom are living in the Myers house, and they are relatives of the Strodes. And the unique part about it is going back to the cult, the Thorn cult. Correct me if I'm wrong, but supposedly they cursed Michael Myers and forced him to rape his niece, Jamie Lloyd.
I believe that's the canonical. They don't explicitly say that in the movie, but that's kind of the main takeaway you get from all the wikis on the movie.
Okay, and then so if anything, her baby, Stephen Lloyd, is Michael Myers' son.
Yeah, that just doesn't rankle me. It's okay if you run around killing everybody. I'm cool with that, but the rape thing just completely turns me off to Michael Myers' character.
Right, and also there was a bit of Amityville horror that takes place because supposedly Michael heard voices telling him to murder his sister, and then Kara Strode's son is also hearing voices. And then it also goes to, I don't know if you remember Fargo from back in the 90s, where the mother, Deborah's body and clothes are found chopped up in the washing machine. Not the wood chipper, but very close. And then the abusive father, John, look behind, dude. You're gone, but you know what? He deserved it.
Which is weird because that movie actually came out before Fargo, so perhaps in some way the Curse of Michael Myers actually inspired, one of the most beloved.
I was going to say it is possible that influenced the writer, especially to put one of the guys in the wood chipper.
Yeah, there are so many talking points about Halloween 6. I'm going to try to get them as quickly as I can here. With you, I agree the producer's cut is definitely the better version of the movie. Beginning with the narration change where in the original, I believe they had Paul Rudd doing the voiceover and the narration. In the producer's cut, they switch over to Donald Pleasance, which I think just makes it feel more like a Halloween movie in general. There's a couple of changes. The ending changes completely. In the original movie, I think it just ends with Michael Myers. What does he do at the end of the movie? It's been a while since I've seen this one. I was
going to say it's been a while since I've seen it too. I think I was just so engrossed throughout the movie that I'm like, what did happen at the end? I want to say that Kara Strode escapes with Tommy Doyle, but then where does the baby go?
Yeah, there's a lot of loose ends in this movie. What I recall about the producer's cut is actually ends with Michael Myers dying, but the evil being passed on to Donald Pleasance. So where he ends up getting the Curse of the Runes, and that sets up a sequel that never happened because unfortunately, Mr. Pleasance died. But yeah, the whole rune mythology, I think if there was any reason to reboot the Halloween series, it would be at this point. Because up until then, the series kind of steered clear of the whole supernatural stuff, which is what I really liked about it. Because obviously with Freddy and Jason, they do have some sort of, supernatural, paranormal stuff going on. Whereas in the first 5 Halloween movies, it never really kind of said Michael Myers anything other than just a guy that's really, really hard to kill. So I like that element of making it a little bit more rooted in reality. But in part 6, it just go completely off the deep end, and you got all this stuff going on. So it kind of took me out of it. But like you said, I mean, it's kind of interesting because this movie does kind of have that very unusual 90s slasher vibe and aesthetic to it. It came out before Scream did, so it's one of the few movies that kind of captured, like you said, the grunge and flannel essence, which you don't really see a whole lot of in these genre movies. And I think
also baggy jeans.
And the baggy jeans. And I think probably my favorite thing about the entire movie is there's actually a character modeled after Howard Stern who gets killed by Michael Myers. So,
oh, yes.
So, I mean,
and that's in the producer's cut as well.
So, how much more 90s can you get than that? Michael Myers killing Howard Stern.
Bizarro.
Yes, WNBC on that one. But yeah, this one's movies where I don't really think it's a good movie or even a good Halloween movie, but I can enjoy it. It has some moments. As long as you don't take it too seriously, it's pretty campy. So I'm just kind of in the middle, and I don't really have major strong feelings one way or the other.
Other than it was very bloody. I mean, in this one, Michael Myers really got creative with his killing sprees. I mean, some of them didn't even consist of blood. I mean, like they had the electrocuting, the washing machine. What else? I mean, any way that he could think of. Like if you're in his way.
Yeah, this is easily the goriest of the Halloween movies. So if you're looking for a lot of special effects and people getting splattered, this might be the Halloween movie for you.
Oh, for sure. Because it definitely has a different type of gore, and that's another reason why I labeled this the unique Michael Myers movie.
And you used the perfect word there. When you say unique and Halloween movie, the next movie in our list, the movie that has nothing to do with any of the other Halloween movies, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. So everybody knows I'm the world's biggest apologist for Friday the 13th Part 5, and I hear you're one of the world's biggest apologists for Halloween 3, so defend this movie's reputation, put it out there.
Yes. All right. Happy Halloween, 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 happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. And it's almost time because Halloween is in a few weeks. And yes, I enjoy this movie because there are recurring actors and close connections in this film, and it doesn't have to be with Michael Myers. First, the movie was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. It was produced by Deborah Hill and John Carpenter. The cinematographer was Dean Cundy, who also helped out with the original Halloween 1 and 2. Tom Atkins, who plays the protagonist, Dan Chalice, was also in The Fog, which is yet another John Carpenter movie and stars Jamie Lee Curtis. Nancy Keys, or Nancy Loomis, plays Linda Chalice, and she was Annie Brackett in Halloween 1 and 2, and also had a great role in The Fog. Jamie Lee Curtis herself does the voiceovers in this film, such as the curfew announcer, the telephone service provider. Dick Warlock, who was Michael Myers in Halloween 2, portrays one of the assassin androids. And then last, Dan, I don't know how to
O'Hearly.
Say this. Say that again?
Dan O'Hearly.
Dan O'Hearly. Okay, because it's got some more syllables in there. But either way, who was the mask maker? If I'm not mistaken, he was also Alex Rogan's reptilian co-pilot and navigator in The Last Starfighter.
And there is a very, very big Last Starfighter connection coming up towards the end of the podcast here, but I'll say that.
Can't wait to elaborate that.
Yes. So, yeah. Yes. Halloween 3, the movie, which I think at the time, everyone, it was kind of a shock, because remember, this movie came out in 1985. Was it 85 or 84?
Season of the Witch? Mm-hmm. It actually came out in 1982.
Wow. It feels a lot more modern than I thought. So, I guess it holds up better. But yeah, so 1982, you got to remember, there's no internet. There's no huge online horror fan community. So nowadays, spoilers on movies come out like as soon as they're put online. So you don't really have anything come to you as a surprise if you're a horror fan now. But if you're a horror fan in 1982, I mean, there's no way to know what the movie's going to be about. You go into this and expect, oh, it's going to be Michael Myers, but you're hit with a completely different, almost sci-fi-ish robot movie. So I can see
witchcraft.
Yeah, and witchcraft.
And also, I'm sure you know that why this is not at the top of my list because of the swarm of snakes that come out of the wearer's corpse. I mean, seriously, the insects were fine, but the snakes coming out of a pumpkin head, couldn't they invent something differently?
You got to give the guys credit. I mean, the studio to say, I got this idea for a movie. It's about this guy who makes masks, who makes children's head explode nationwide on Halloween. That's pretty extreme material. I mean, that's a hard sell for a lot of film studios, but they pulled it off. So for the movie, I think like everybody else, I've done an about face on it. I hated it back in the day. But now that a couple of years have passed, I've sat down, put my biases aside. It's a pretty entertaining little movie. I think if they would have called it anything other than Halloween 3, it probably would have become like a miniature cult classic of the time frame. But because it had the Halloween in front of it, I think it's what kind of doomed it and jeopardized it from the start.
Right. And do you think that they would have still called it Season of the Witch? Because they do have the typical, like, Halloween masks, like pumpkins, witches, skeletons.
I think that'd be a perfect title. I mean, one of the ideas here...
You can't think of anything better?
Masks that make kids' heads explode on Halloween? Yeah, that's the best one I can think of. So I'm really conflicted about this movie because it stars Tom Atkins as our lead hero, who is also the lead hero in one of my all-time favorite movies, Night of the Creeps, which I could do like an entire mini-series on why that's such a great movie. But in this one, I think his performance, not saying it's bad, it's just a little bit too low-key. And here's an idea I've been thinking about the last couple of days. Do you think the movie would have been better received had that character been played by Donald Pleasance?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, because again, they completely opted out. Like you said, Donald Pleasance, Michael Myers, Dr. Loomis, and Tom Atkins, did really well. But again, he, for the main protagonist, like you said, he was low-key at times, sometimes effortless. What if that had been Donald Pleasance? Do you think he would have really taken that more powerful approach once he figured out that the mask maker was just trying to kill all these kids?
I think, the Halloween series could have maybe gone in a couple different routes, more with having Donald Pleasance the anchor character more than Michael Myers. I think he brings just such a seriousness and such a sincerity to the role. I mean, when Dr. Loomis says, I shot him 8 times or whatever, you feel it. He brings such a legitimacy to what would be kind of campy material in anybody else's hand. It's just, it has that gravitas to him. And I think he could have pulled this off and made it a little bit more respectable, or a little bit more believable, a little bit more effective.
Mm-hmm. He does get to watch the original Halloween when he first puts on the mask. So if anything, there's a connection right there.
Absolutely. And of course, John Carpenter did do the music for this one, so even though we don't have him behind the camera, he's still bringing out the synth, and got nothing bad to say about that.
Oh, he certainly is.
All right, and moving from Halloween 3 to Halloween 4, this is The Return of Michael Myers, came out in 1988.
You got it. 1988 was a good year. That was Debbie Gibson, Paula Abdul, New Kids on the Block. Don't forget Bobby McFerrin's Don't Worry, Be Happy, all in the same year. And as a fun cue, Kelly Meeker mentions MTV, but then later she has some coffee. Spill. So since Jamie Lee Curtis decided not to work in this film, her character was written off and Laurie Strode had died in a car accident, leaving Jamie Lloyd, her daughter, in foster care. Now, I know we're going to elaborate soon, but there's this one scene where a younger Jamie is on her father's shoulders. And some fans like to believe that Jimmy, the paramedic from Halloween 2, is the father of that child. What are your thoughts on that? There is no proof that he is the dad, and it doesn't look like Jimmy, but where's that going?
Well, I don't want to give away the Lance Guest connection quite yet, but
Right.
but I mean, it's a very, very subtle fan theory. I mean, I've heard some really great things about that one. It's kind of not the most inventive, but I can see it. But just knowing the way, like, just life in general turns out, it's probably just some random guy that was never introduced in the earlier movies. Although,
right.
personally, in my own headcanon, I wanted to be Ben Tramer so bad.
A lot of people wanted to be Ben Tramer, and going back to Ben Tramer, now it has now been 10 years since that night, and the kids Laurie babysat for appeared in the movie. I mean, you had Rachel Carruthers, who's Jamie's foster sister, Lindsay Wallace. Also, supposedly Tommy Doyle was one of Brady's friends at the discount mart, but again, there is no evidence on that. But in this movie, I loved the costumes and decorations. I mean, I remember wearing those type of costumes back in 1988. The plastic masks, the capes, carrying school lunches, and gosh, lots of candy and double scoops of ice cream for Jamie. Gee, she's lucky. I mean, I've been fasting all day. You want an oinker for a podcaster? And Sasha Jensen's character was hilarious because the big shot tried to punch Michael Myers after the gun situation failed. Once the blood kicked in for him and once he was pushed against the wall, there was no turning back. So to quote his better-known movie, Dazed and Confused, check you later, you're gone.
Yeah, I'm absolutely kind of surprised here that there was such a major lapse between Halloween 3 and Halloween 4. I didn't know it was a 6-year grace period between sequels, so that's kind of mind-blowing to me. So yeah, one name we haven't talked about, and Halloween has many, many creators. You've got John Carpenter, Deborah Hill, Dean Cundy, which I'm glad you brought up, because I'm going to talk about him a little bit later on. But the one name we haven't brought up, I think, is very pivotal to the entire Halloween franchise, Mustafa Akkad, who is the executive producer of, I believe, Halloween 1 through 6, and he's a guy who most studio heads are really embarrassed of these kind of movies. Like the guys at Paramount love making money off Friday the 13th. They're kind of embarrassed to get them out there because they're supposedly lower trash cinema. This is a guy who never was ashamed about these Halloween movies. He loved them. He loved promoting them. And it's long been said that Halloween...
He loved working with them.
Absolutely. And it's actually long been said that Halloween 4 is his favorite film in the entire franchise, even above the original. And one of the reasons why he said that is because it's one of the few horror movies out there where the human beings actually act like human beings. And I watched a movie recently, and I kind of understand that, because this is one of those movies where, in most horror movies, for the entire premise to work, you have to kind of be under the assumption that people in them are absolute morons. Like, if you go outside and there's a guy with a chainsaw, you run towards him, right? Hey, what are you doing on my property?
Right.
This is one of the few horror movies I've seen where the characters actually walk out, see Michael Myers, and go, nope, stepping back. I'm going back in. I'm not going to mess with this guy. And
right. And it got tricky because, all the Halloween pranksters and then all those hillbillies, they pretended to be Michael Myers. And, if anything, they were asking for it because here you got Donald Pleasance, or Dr. Loomis, I should say, and Sheriff Meeker just on the loose. And, they got guns, they got weapons, and then all of a sudden, there's these pranksters saying, hey, it's me, and then Sheriff Meeker's just like, go home, this is not the time to be kidding around.
One thing, kind of an aside here, but it's always kind of bothering me about this movie is, okay, so Michael Myers killed 16 people back in 1978, canonically, but in Haddonfield, they're still selling the Michael Myers mask 10 years later. Seems like it'd be kind of poor taste to kind of have those things still around.
And then don't forget, Jamie chooses that clown costume, the one that Michael Myers wore when he first killed his sister at 6 years old.
And of course, kind of a little bit of foreshadowing there because the movie actually ends with Danielle Harris stabbing her stepmom to death. Sort of a throwback to the original.
But then she actually, or supposedly, survives in Halloween 5 because they adopted Jamie, even though she stabbed her foster mother at the time.
So they kind of abandoned that in part 5, right? They kind of had the idea of carrying on the sequel, doing the whole Tommy Jarvis thing where the evil passes on from one generation to the next. So do you think they should have carried with that, or did do the right thing by kind of abandoning that story arc in part 5?
It's hard to answer that question because, I liked how they continued Halloween 4 and Halloween 5 as opposed to skipping around and then retconning all the sequels. But still, there could have been like some more growth and development with the characters. Also, when you said Tommy Jarvis, did you mean Tommy Doyle?
Oh, no, Tommy Jarvis in Friday the 13th Part 5, where they kind of...
Yes, Tommy Jarvis in Friday the 13th, that is correct.
Where they kind of make him out to be like the next big Jason replacement. Then in Part 6, oh, never mind, we're going back to Jason. So kind of the same vibe, I think, the transition here.
And I think that's kind of what happened with Danielle's character, where Jamie Lloyd became the next Michael Myers, but of course in a female version.
All right, and moving along from Halloween 4 from 1988, we're going to skip ahead about 30 years here to Halloween 2018. So, I'm doing the timeline here. So, Halloween H2O, that changed the canon there, retconned out everything after Halloween 2. So, this movie comes along and wipes out Halloween 2. So now it's just the events of Halloween 1 happened and nothing after that happened canonically. So, just before we get into the meat of the matter of the movie, do you have any thoughts about that, about kind of canceling out the Michael Myers mythos from 1981 up until like 2009?
And Jazzy James, I like how you mentioned that because, and that's probably why I had it on the middle of my list, because although David Gordon Green, wrote and directed a great film, it still takes a while to realize that every sequel was retconned. It literally picks up 40 years after the 1978 Haddonfield murders. And it's a scary movie, but it's also kind of melancholy, where you have Laurie Strode, who is suffering from PTSD. She's a drunk recluse. She shoots guns at her hobby. Basically is waiting for Michael's inevitable return. And her trauma results in an estranged relationship with her daughter, Karen, and her granddaughter, Allison. But what I did like is Jamie Lee Curtis reprised her role in this movie, respectively. And I also like how Allison becomes Laurie Strode, and then Laurie Strode becomes Dr. Loomis.
I never picked up on that. That's kind of a cool concept. So yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis, what a career she's had. She's been in True Lies, she was in My Girl, she was in Trading Places, but despite all... Freaky Friday. Despite all these movies, these big mainstream movies, she will forever be known as Laurie Strode.
She will. She is the iconic scream queen.
So it was great to see her coming back to the genre, the movie that made her famous to begin with. Before we get into that, I want to go back to Halloween 4 for just 1 second, because there's a piece of trivia I have to throw out there which I cannot go to bed tonight without throwing it out there to the internet ether. So the guy who directed Halloween 4 was a guy named Dwight H. Little, and he's had a pretty long career in Hollywood. So I guess Halloween 4 is probably his most famous movie. But you know what his second most famous movie is?
This is embarrassing, but I don't know.
Well, it's the most obvious thing in the world. You make a movie about a psycho killer stalking children. Who better to direct Free Willy Part 2?
Free Willy Part 2. Okay.
So just got that out there. The same guy who made Halloween 4 made Free Willy Part 2. So what a world. All right.
Interesting combination.
Yeah, definitely. He's got all his bases covered. So yeah, Halloween 2018, kind of a mixed bag here. There are some things that I really, really like. There's some things that I did not enjoy at all. For example, the idea of kind of replacing Dr. Loomis with this more evil, sort of self-centered, self-serving kind of psychiatric ward for Michael Myers, I wasn't really kind of a big fan of. And the idea of Michael Myers is supposed to be 70 in this movie now. What would his canonical age be?
It is 40 years later, and also one of the scenes that really sticks out was the awkward dinner conversation with Cameron Elam, who was supposedly the son of Lonnie Elam. He bullied Tommy Doyle back in 1978, and it's funny when Laurie Strode approaches them, and she just looks at him awkwardly and says, "I'm the grandmother." Yeah, I'm the grandmother, and then just downs a glass of wine. And you could tell it affected her because she still makes that connection. Now, to my knowledge, in deleted scenes, Cameron actually insults the police officers at the party and gets arrested. So that is the fortunate part about not being one of Michael Myers' victims. However, he is just as rebellious and troublesome as his father was. He gets drunk, deceives Allison, and throws her phone into a bowl of pudding. Why would you throw an electronic device into a bowl of pudding? I love pudding.
That scene really got to me too. That's one of those things where like I shouldn't be so unnerved by that, but anytime you have like an electronic equipment dumped in like Jello or pudding, I'm just like, I'm just fortunate it wasn't.
And it's not going to work again.
Yeah, I'm just fortunate it wasn't potato salad. I mean, at least with pudding, it's something delicious to work with. So yeah, I really liked the finale of this movie. I think it really kind of brought back sort of the old school 1970s, just thrill a minute, which has kind of been lacking in modern horror now that we're in the whole slow burn cinematic era. So anything you just want to say just about how the film concluded and how we're kind of setting ourselves up for not just one but now 2 sequels now?
Right, and well, first I'm going to say thank God I don't do crime journalism because those journalists, oh my gosh, I would not want to see teeth before being strangled to death or battered against the unsanitary bathroom walls, doors, stalls, etc. There was also an intense moment when they tried to give Michael Myers his mask at Smith's Grove, and it's very intense and your heart stops because for a moment you think that he's eventually going to talk, but he chooses not to. Also, as the reviews of this Halloween and Halloween Kills, are still, numerous and extensive, many fans have asked, who is the father of Karen Strode? And again, going back to when you said, hey, hopefully it was Ben Tramer because he was mentioned in the original Halloween. Unfortunately, the news stories came out as some dude Laurie met at a bar. She doesn't even remember his name. But here's the funny part. When one of my friends and I first found out about that, we joked around saying that she hooked up with the Amazing Grace paramedic in Halloween 2. Because, hey, now he's still alive and obnoxious, so that might have done it.
Halloween 2, and that is a perfect segue to, it looks like we have number 3 on our countdown here from 1981. The first Halloween sequel, directed by Rick Rosenthal, who does a whole lot better in this one than he did in Halloween Resurrection.
Yes, and there are 3 elements to this movie. There's terror, romance, and uncertainty. And if anything, this is a big night for Laurie Strode, as 3 men are chasing after her. You got Michael Myers, of course, Jimmy the paramedic, and a little bit of Ben Tramer before he's burned. But of course, the meticulous Mrs. Alves ruins it by saying, men, you can't live with them, and you can't live without them. But there are a lot of interesting characters in Halloween 2, because you have the foul-mouthed flamboyant Bud, the gullible Mr. Garrett, the reserved drunken Dr. Mixter, and, as everyone knows, Dana Carvey, who played the reporter's assistant, also had a small role in this movie.
I really, really, really love this movie. This is actually, I saw this before I saw the first Halloween movie, so it kind of holds a special place in my heart as a Michael Myers fan here. I don't even know where to begin. There's just so many great elements to this one. This was movies where I think it's actually still really kind of scary because the idea of going into a hospital is such a creepy place to begin with, where you have like all these sharp equipment and there's so many doors and corridors. It's a really brilliant concept for a slasher movie. Kind of set in some major complex like that. And the kills in this movie are just downright tremendous. You got the hot bath sequence, which still kind of creeps me out to this day. You got the syringe to the eyeball. We've got the mall cop getting the claw hammer to the head. Michael Myers, he is definitely pissed in this one.
Oh, he is. And also, going back to the various killing scenes, some of the nurses had quite a challenge filming this. Pamela Susan Shoop, who plays Nurse Karen, she contracted an ear infection during that difficult scene. because I'm sure you know, spoilers, the water was not scalding, but it was actually freezing and contaminated. And she and Leo Rossi it was to the extent where their teeth were chattering. And then Anna Alicia, Nurse Janet, took a big fall during her death scene and had to get stitches around her eye. And if you look closely, this is why some of the shots, especially in the break room, are at an angle, so you can't see the swollenness or the black eyes.
And there are so many great lines in the movie, but I can't say any of them due to the profanity there. So, I don't know. Do you have like a favorite quote or just a favorite particular, moment or throwaway line in the movie?
This movie is also very touching because the intimacy between Laurie and Jimmy escalates amid recuperating from her injuries and her encounter with Michael Myers. And going back to the actor, Lance Guest, as we know from Halloween 2, The Last Starfighter, Jaws 4, if anything, this was very beneficial for him because not only did he get to work with the appealing and outgoing nurses, but Nick Castle, who was Michael Myers in the original Halloween, directed The Last Starfighter, and he was very impressed with his performance as Jimmy as Halloween 2. When he was looking to recruit Alex, he wanted a character that resembled shyness, but also determination, outgoing. So Lance Guest was the first actor that he thought to play in that role. And Jazzy James, you actually had the opportunity to interview him several years ago.
Yeah, totally random event. I was at a video game convention. I had my media pass. I turned around and there is completely out of the blue the guy from The Last Starfighter. So you get out there in the world, crazy things happen. You never know. The main character from Halloween 2 might show up.
Right, who knows? And also, who was the hottest nurse? I mean, from your perspective, who was the most attractive?
I'm going to have difficulty recalling their names. But the one that probably I remember the most was the one who went out to her car and almost escaped, but she had the flat tire.
Nurse Jill Franco. That's the one where she was stabbed in the back by Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the one with the short blonde hair?
Yes, that's the one that made the most impression of my formative years. So yeah, I mean, I guess you got eye candy on both sides of the spectrum in this one. So what's not to love about Halloween 2?
Right, and then going back to Lance Guest, it really helped him, build his acting career. Because originally there was not supposed to be a Halloween 2 because John Carpenter's Halloween was a huge success, and then Halloween 2 came, and again that helped with his acting career, and hopefully I'll get the chance to meet him because he was the hottest in that movie, for sure.
Even hotter than your ex-husband Donald Pleasance? That's why you got divorced. Okay, it makes sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say right. Yeah, once I got divorced, I was able to look and touch at the same time.
All right. And coming to number 2, our penultimate film on the countdown here, and I was kind of surprised when I saw this one ranked so high, but when I actually went back and rewatched it, I'm like, oh, okay, well now it makes sense. From 1998, it is Halloween H2O. Surprisingly enough,
love this.
Not a lot of stuff to do with water in this movie, surprisingly.
Right. And they say blood is thicker than water. Directed by Steve Miner. I loved the music in this movie. The Halloween theme is so powerful. It's an orchestra themed with various instruments playing in the crisp but freaky fall air as it reintroduces the story from 20 years ago. The music sways and seeps through like fog. And one of the scenes I really like is when Laurie Strode throws all those knives at him. No matter where and when she threw, he was able to bypass them. He must have taken maneuvering lessons.
I think it's right.
He made it.
I think it's right after he got the driving lessons in part 1.
Oh, yes, and I'm going to elaborate that, but more to that. And with Halloween H2O, of course, memorable cast from the 1990s. You had Jodie Lynn O'Keefe, Josh Hartnett, Michelle Williams, LL Cool J, and then additionally, Janet Leigh is in this movie with her daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis.
So once again, we were denied an LL Cool J Michael Myers crossover rap song. How did that go through the cracks?
It did. I mean, hey, he ended up playing the security guard in H2O? So he must have pulled it off very well.
So one of the things, I can't remember who said this, but someone, I think, perfectly encapsulated this movie. It feels like a really, really good made-for-TV movie. And it kind of seems like a backhanded compliment, but when you go back and watch it, I mean, it's really well structured. I mean, it's not a very bloody movie, it's not a very exploitative movie, it's just very much well-paced, a lot of suspense to it. And I think next to the original Halloween movie, it's probably the most well-structured as far as the scares and building up atmosphere and ambiance. It does really get kind of creepy and unnerving at times, and not something you see a whole lot of in post-90s movies. Now, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but wasn't this film written by Kevin Williamson, the same guy who did Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer?
I believe so. And in relevance to what you said, yes, outstanding atmosphere. I mean, the ending is so emotional, where it is almost convincing that Michael Myers goes from belligerent to benevolent. Yes, belligerent to benevolent. Tongue twister, but they both have different meanings. But Laurie Strode knows better as she decapitates him. But I remember when this movie came out, it was right before I went to college, and I was ecstatic because not only was I brave enough to watch horror films, but I was of legal age to see R-rated movies in theaters. So go see H2O.
Yeah, I got nothing bad to say about this. This is a really, really good movie. It holds up a lot better than I thought it did, and you know what? It's got Creed in it. It's got paramedics getting their heads cut off. What's not to love?
I know. Well, we don't find out later on that it was a paramedic getting their head cut off, but still, I mean, this movie is fantastic. I mean, and then of course, the beginning brings back nostalgia, where you have Nurse Marion reintroducing Michael Myers, her neighbor Jimmy, and also running through the Halloween decorations like a haunted house, going next door, going through Laurie Strode's paperwork. I mean, it's like a roller coaster.
Fantastic. I still think it's kind of underrated a little bit, even all these years later. Well, what can we say? We're at the #1 movie, and there is not a surprise about this one. I could go on for days about what makes the original Halloween from 1978 such a great movie. Not just one of my favorite horror movies, but one of my favorite movies just across any genre. So I'll let you have the ground floor here. When you think Halloween, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
The Halloween, 1978. The Night He Came Home, directed by John Carpenter. Oh no! I forgot to research this. Who cares? At work today, I forgot to work on a disbursement, close out legal cases, and I forgot to e-file, and I also forgot to manage the calendar. Who needs that anyway? I mean, this movie is totally my all-time favorite. It's fun and scary at the same time, where even Lester the dog has a death date and not a hot date. And don't go to the Myers house on Halloween. And I mean, don't, because if you do, get your ass away from there. Go ahead, but I do have more to say.
Yeah, there are so many great things, but I really don't know where to begin. I think this is one of those rare horror films from the 1970s, but I think still holds up incredibly well. I mean, it's still effective even now. The hairdos are a little outdated, the lingo is a little bit passé, but it still works. And I've long said this to everyone, this is my all-time favorite musical. Because without John Carpenter's score, it's like you almost don't even need the visual. It does such a great job of carrying the atmosphere and the story along. So, I mean, it's just everything. It's just such a masterpiece, and it's so simplistic. And I think a lot of directors are going to learn from that. You don't have to go...
That horror-stricken atmosphere.
Yes, absolutely. And, really, what more can be said about how great this movie is? You got PJ Souls running around, not listening to the Ramones, but listening to Blue Oyster Cult. You got Jamie Lee Curtis in her big breakout role here, walking around, wearing really, really ridiculously tight jeans. I don't know how she got into those, but I don't even know if that's a fashion thing in the 70s. And of course you got Donald Pleasance running around playing the modern day Van Helsing to the evil Michael Myers.
Yes, and this is where it all began on Halloween night back in 1963, where 6-year-old Michael Myers stabs his sister Judith to death. And then for the next 15 years, Dr. Loomis had kept him locked up in the mental institution. On October 30th of 1978, he and Nurse Marion go to Smith Grove to escort Michael to court. Unfortunately, brilliant Michael escapes. Now, supposedly, Michael could not drive, but then Dr. Loomis exclaims, "Maybe someone around here has been giving him lessons." I'm telling you, he is the only one who understood his patient. And there's also a lot of fun facts about Halloween in 1978. First, Laurie Strode is the name of one of John Carpenter's ex-girlfriends. Another one is where Deborah Hill, who also babysat during her teenage years, wrote most of the female characters' stories and dialogue, while John Carpenter focused more on Dr. Loomis and Michael Myers. 2, Alfred Hitchcock characters' names are referenced. The first one is Tommy Doyle from Rear Window back in 1954, and Sam Loomis from Psycho back in 1960, who stars Janet Leigh. So, if anything, it's just very ironic. A lot of close connections there, and I mean, just so many memorable scenes with this movie. Another one is where Laurie Strode barely escapes Michael Myers, where she injuredly runs from the Wallaces to the Doyle's house. Her neighbor dismisses her concerns. She loses the keys. Tommy Doyle is sleepily and slowly creeping downstairs. He is oblivious to what's going on. Also, another one is where Annie and Lindsay Wallace are walking to the Doyles, and then Michael just pops up from behind the car. I must have seen this movie 100 times and never realized how creepy that was. Like, he was just there.
Yeah, and one of the names we referenced a little bit earlier in the podcast, Dean Cudney, who was the cinematographer for this movie, this guy has gone on to have just a huge, huge career. He did Jurassic Park, he did Back to the Future, he's done a lot of movies, and I think he doesn't really get enough credit for kind of giving this movie its atmosphere and its general vibe. And in fact, one thing I noticed is actually he kind of carried that over into Jurassic Park. The iconic Michael Myers head tilt was later used for the Velociraptors in that movie.
Yes, and I remember reading about that. And yes, I mean, I think that Dean Cundey should get more credit for his work, because again, not only has he done a lot, but he also comes to the conventions with some of the cast members, whether it be Halloween 2 or the original Halloween, also Halloween 3. And yeah, I mean, like, there's more to him than the cinematographer.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, there's not really, I can't think of one single scene from Halloween which stands out. But for my money, this probably has like the best concluding 15-minute stretch of any horror movie ever made, even now, 40 some odd years later. Just the way it's filmed, the use of darkness, the shadows, the isolation, the claustrophobia. I mean, even, sort of the playoff between Jamie Lee Curtis's screams with the soundtrack, absolutely, I think, unparalleled in the genre. I still yet to see a movie that really kind of outdoes the grand finale in this one.
Yes, and again, if it hadn't been for John Carpenter, I mean, she would not land where she is today. I mean, this, again, as we, critiqued earlier, I mean, this is one of the films that just really brought it out. Because shortly after Halloween, I mean, she had somewhat of a 2-year gap where she did those low-budget films like Terror Train, Prom Night, and then of course moved on to Halloween 2, and then during the 1980s decade, I mean, she was, toward the end of the 80s, she appeared in A Fish Called Wanda, and she just kept moving up and auditioning and landing all these roles.
You know, it's going to sound weird, but I think this is like actually one of like the most like comforting movies like in my entire like film library. It's going to sound weird, but like growing up as a kid, this was like the one movie my mom and I watched every Halloween. We'd kick back and get some popcorn and watch Halloween. So even now, it kind of has like this sort of like fuzzy sentimental quality to it, even if it is about a psycho killer murdering babysitters in Illinois, even though it's actually set in California. But who's to judge?
It's good, and just with the whole plot, like little does kind-hearted, brainy, introverted Laurie Strode know that she is about to have like this eventful night. I mean, she sees Michael Myers in various scenes, but does not know who he is, and then her perky friends just tease her and say that she never has any dates. And of course, going back to Dr. Loomis, I mean, just nobody believed him that this guy was on the loose, like not even Sheriff Brackett. And his daughter was totally at fate.
Yeah, I think we got to say at least one or two more things about Donald Pleasance. I mean, I know we talked about him extensively throughout the podcast, but he's such an integral part of the entire Halloween experience, and especially this movie. Do you think the movie would have worked if you actually had a different actor? I mean, I believe it was it Christopher Lee who was originally lined up to play Dr. Loomis in this movie?
I recently read that he was up for that part, but then he rejected it, and then Donald Pleasance got it. I mean, Donald Pleasance and Christopher Lee, I mean, they're both, like, very talented actors, but honestly, I mean, Donald Pleasance, I mean, he's irreplaceable, because I guess I'm just so used to seeing him in most of the Halloween franchises.
Yeah, I think he really is above Michael Myers, above Jamie Lee Curtis, even above John Carpenter. He's the heart and soul of the Halloween franchise. So whenever we talk about the thing that makes this series different, what makes it stand out from all the other slash movies from the 80s we've all forgotten about, it's that gravitas of Donald Pleasance. And I think that's kind of the secret formula to why this series is so well regarded, whereas some other ones have kind of fallen to the wayside.
Right, and also to add, when I met Danielle Harris at Days of the Dead Atlanta back in February, she said that he treated her like a granddaughter. I mean, she said it was wonderful to work with, very supportive, and a lot of the other actors from the original Halloween, Halloween 2, 4, 5, and 6. I mean, I have not heard anything negative about Donald Pleasance.
So I guess we're going to have to dedicate this podcast to Donald Pleasance. Wherever you are out there, thank you for the memories.
Oh, absolutely. And folks, Michael Myers may not victimize you in your dreams or stalk you at Camp Crystal Lake, but, however, he will slaughter you in the hospital's, quote, hot tub, in the barn full of kittens, dirty public restrooms, and, of course, the Wallace's house with Judith Myers' gravestones for props. Either way, once he catches up, he will terrorize you. Happy Halloween, and under doctor's orders, watch out for the babysitter murders. Because that was supposed to be the original title.
And oddly enough, Deborah Hill then went on to make Adventures in Babysitting, so full circle.
Full circle right there.
All right, well, that's pretty much everything I've got here. Anything you want to add there, Kit Kat, Kristen?
Or Dr. Samantha Loomis?
Or Dr. Samantha Loomis?
No worries. Again, that's how I concluded. Watch out, beware. Michael Myers will give you a scare. And happy Halloween.
I can't think of a better note to go out than that. All right, James Swift from Uncommon Journalism, thanks for listening.
Take care. Until next time.